that, but you know, with my glass.
Love it.
I know.
Oh, I didn't bring my readers, but yeah.
I do it at the grocery store all the time. People ask me to read ingredients too.
Well, I can't read without them now, like everything's blurry. Something I can see.
Well, it's 6 o'clock and we're going to get started. So who's kicking us off, Ms. Erdman?
Miss Lowry's gonna kick us off.
She's going to kick us off. Well, kick away.
Good evening, council. So tonight we're gonna go through more of the 2023 budget. Mostly sticking to the highlights and the one-time expenditures. Last
Very
meeting,
bottom.
we talked about our revenues as well as the FTE requests that we were putting forward. And so we'll also touch on those tonight as well as we go through the different departments and funds. So for the general fund, the expenditure highlights, we did already talk about the 2 FTE requests, the parking enforcement officer, as well as the long-range planner. And then we also have in the budget the full year of the deputy city manager for the 2022 budget. That was salary savings with the city attorney position being vacant, so we didn't do a budget amendment for that position. So next year's budget includes that full cost. When we look at our WCIA insurance, it increased 100,000 up to 295,000. And that just continues to increase. We have some thoughts as far as lobbying is pushing back on where we're less than 1% liable, not having to put money forward, because a lot of the claims coming forward to WCIA, it's the city's a very small portion responsible, yet they foot the bill. And so hopefully maybe changing that law to where we don't have to pay out as much as municipality and jurisdictions. So that's going to take some external lobbying and push back on the state to get those laws changed.
Is there anyone else?
Besides WCIA, no. Well, I take that back. There is other folks. CIAW Ellensburg also does local cities, but they have the same issues as well as their coverage, as well as what they do as a service isn't as good as WCIA, and cost wise, it'd be cost neutral. So while there is another option, it's not necessarily a viable option.
Have we looked at Canfield and Associates out of Ephrata?
That's CIAW.
That is,
City
because I know they
Insurance
have,
Association of Washington.
I know guys that work there, and they actually came and presented to John Williams and I when I was mayor. But they have a lot of additional things that WCIA doesn't, such as the law enforcement training trailer, the shoot no shoot scenarios. There's some driving stuff that they do too. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if it's the same price, but we get better things from them.
And I think when we had brought that before, because I've actually been to Canfield Associates when I was an auditor, so they're actually privately funded as well. They're quasi municipal.
Yeah.
Because they have that backing, so they're able to get like the umbrella coverage that your WCIAs are unable to, which is an interesting mix. But based on what we had talked about before with the former risk manager, what they had heard back from folks who had used them, there was some questionable things, but we can definitely look into it again and look to see if the pros outweigh the cons, or if it's viable to move, because it does
I mean,
keep getting more expensive.
That's $950 a day.
Correct. Well, and including everything that we pay them, we pay WCA close to $500,000 between. This is our liability insurance. We also have our auto through there as well.
Oh,
as
this
our
is
rental.
not.
This is just our general fund liability. insurance.
Oh, so this isn't covering the building, covering the cars.
It would cover the building because the building's under the general fund, but it wouldn't cover like the office building that's under sewer, and it wouldn't cover all the cars because that's spread out amongst the different funds.
So
this
we're
is
into
strictly
them
just the general.
800,000,
500,
295 plus another two,
correct.
$10,000 a week.
I just think that, WCIA is similar to AWC. We'll take your money and we'll act like we do something for you, but really they're just an insurance company looking for money. That's it, right? And they provide us the service. They do if we have a claim, but I know the school district uses well, it's no longer Canfield. What did you say it was?
It's always been, it's CIAW, so Cities Insurance Association of Washington, which is run by Canfield and Associates or was. I'm not sure. if
I don't
it's
even think
been
it's Canfield anymore. They got
They
bought out
transferred
by some company out of Florida, if I remember right. But just having the ability to, I know at the time, you know, that training trailer was a big deal. And I see it, I'm up there all the time. I see it sitting there. So it's there to be used by those companies or those people that participate in it. It'd be nice to.
But now the difference between the schools and us are, they don't have cops.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so there's.
But they have a training trailer
there-
for the cops.
Yeah, but there's a
And the school doesn't.
there's a different liability.
No,
there.
I understand. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So is it still cheaper to do this than it is to self-insure?
Yes,
Still better deal? Okay.
yes. Just imagine that you get hit with that one lawsuit
Okay.
that then empties all of our coffers. So,
Do we self-insure comp and collision?
no, that is through WCA as well. My acronym, remembering between CIAW and W, the tongue twister.
And that's with a $1,000 deductible? And do you know how many claims we made last year?
I do actually. I have
Not
that
how many,
information.
but how many dollars in claims were paid out?
I don't know if I have the dollar amount. We report that as part of our annual financial report. So give me a second.
Because I'm going to give you the same question I ask all the slick shoot guys that come in here that represent us in DC and in Olympia. Are we givers or are we takers?
Well, we're given.
Oh, is any insurance company.
We're
until you
given.
get that
Yeah.
claim.
But so,
So,
no, I understand. They don't, it's like Vegas. They don't
Yeah,
build
they don't build
insurance
casinos
off
off
of
your-
winners. I get it.
So for claims processed against the city. This is 2021, by the way, not
Okay.
2022. So there was 4 for a total of $5,810.
How much?
Then
Oh, 5,800.
claims processed by the city, 17, 66,120. So,
So less than 10 grand?
well, it would be between the two, just over 70,
Oh, I thought you said 5,800 and
66.
66,000. I'm sorry. I might.
and 5,800. So $72,000. And for that, we paid 450 roughly. Oh, well, it was the insurance agents.
We can definitely look into CIA.
They're like lawyers.
It's been a while. But like I said, bring that back as an option too.
Let's shop it just to see.
Is there a possibility to kind of bring up with what the deputy mayor said is, and Troy probably knows this too, is there a way you can self-insure up to a certain point? And so we just go, because I know I think our church does that. They do high
High deductible.
deductible and we self-insure up to a certain point. And so that if someone runs into our car, they're dealing with an insurance company. They don't think it's just the city that has unlimited money. They deal with this insurance company, but we're paying, you know, the first and I mean, if you.
Is that we have to be to a certain population before we can look at being self-insured. I don't know exactly what that number is off the top of my head. I can look into that, but I think there's a magic population number.
And I can't give advice, so unfortunately,
Do what?
I can't give advice unfortunately on that.
Well, and with WCIA, I
Yeah,
know. that
what
it's-
good are you?
I think it's 1,000.
But can you go to a high deductible then? Could you just go to a higher
Higher
deductible?
than 1,000, so like 5,000.
Yeah, just like $5,000 to $10,000 deductible. I mean, we only paid out.
How much, what, was that $71,000 auto accidents on our part?
It doesn't give me the detail. It just has processed by the city or for the city. So it doesn't tell me the breakdown. I'm sorry.
It just. at $10,000 a week, certainly we can at least see if whoever they are now out there in Ephrata or wherever they are, if they can save us $1 or $2
We can look at
without
the-
giving up the protection.
I vaguely recalling something about the deduction because of WCIA being a pool versus an insurance company that I don't think they allow you to go over a certain amount for your deductible,
Yeah.
but and I believe we're at the higher one, which is shocking that a city is at 1,000 versus like you said, a 5 or 10, because we obviously could likely afford that
Yeah,
to pay that out.
I
So
carry 1,000.
we'll look and see, and we'll look into CIAW.
1,000.
But if you're an
Well-
insurance company and you say, look, the most you can go is 1,000, I'm sorry, that's the highest deductible you can do. That's how they charge you $500,000 a year for your insurance, is they say, that is our high deductible plan, when everyone else is going,
What are you saying about it?
they don't build casinos by you losing.
You win. Okay.
So then the next item we have on here is the city hall carpet and interior paint estimated at 210,000, as well as city hall landscaping improvements exterior of the building for an estimated 75,000.
And Mark, that's every square yard in the building.
For the first one or the second one,
Carpet,
for the carpet. Yeah, other than the,
square feet and paint, square yards in carpet.
other than the new conference room and the bank down at Homebridge or whatever, they just got new carpet a couple years ago. So it'd be everything else. And then it includes I'll call it linoleum. I don't know if that's it, but the white stuff you see, and then there's some white tile. The bathrooms wouldn't get done because they have a solider tile that I think we're just gonna clean it, but it's still in good shape. So it'd be everything but those.
And how long is? Because we're gonna chase people out of their offices, I assume. We go back to remembering HVAC. And so how long?
It won't take anywhere as long as that, but we need to set up we haven't done the staging yet, so we're still figuring that out.
And are you picking the pattern?
Erin gets paid the big bucks to do that.
She's the
As
pattern
long as you
picker.
don't do PDX carpet.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna ask if we're going PDX carpet. So
Yeah, something that kind of, hides the dirt will hold up over time.
and when do you hope to have that done?
They'll be ready to bid in beginning of the year.
How old is this carpet?
It's been in here since, other than this one, I think this one was in a little bit after we came in, but stuff out there is since the original building.
Oh, it is.
I think, aren't we
Contractually,
obligated to replace it with our tenants, right? Or at least it.
The paint and the carpet and HVAC and all that is on the city.
and then is she picking paint colors too? Contractor beige, which is what this is.
So Eric's been painting,
It's a
I'll call
blue
it a white or
color.
a beige and then a blue. So it's probably going to be a combo of those.
He's painting it?
No, he's not painting, but
Okay.
in the rooms he's painted, that's the combo that we've used.
He's requested that we keep the same pattern throughout the building, so he knows what paint to buy at all times.
And that's very smart. And then on the landscaping, what's your hopes?
Do something similar to a community center. So get rid of all the dead and dying plants and the overgrown and the ground cover and all of that. So probably rock, bark, dust mix, simple plants, less water.
Okay, the next item was an Old Town master plan. Originally, this was in the budget for 150,000, but 100,000 of it was taken out due to the long range planner is going to do the majority of this plan with the technical assistance for the pieces that they cannot do, which is estimated at 50,000, which it may be less than that. That would be the max amount. And then we also have, this is the first of two different ADA transition plans. This one is for our facilities, and then we'll also have one later for parks. So moving our facilities to be up to code for ADA. And then we also.
That's paper? That's $100,000 worth of paper?
Yeah, it's a plan.
How many buildings do we own? That people go into?
We've got 5, I believe, community center, senior center, police station here, and then the administration building at ops.
The senior center is roughly 20 by 75 rectangular. That, I mean, with one entrance. $100,000 you think it's gonna cost to?
Yeah, we got
to
an
pay for
estimate.
this?
We got an estimate from a consultant, and that's what it was at.
Shocking.
In fairness, the right of way one came in a lot cheaper than they estimated, so I'm guessing it will, because we only pay what they actually spend it. So I expect it to be less, but this is kind of a high estimate to cover.
I know you'll find this odd, but as I go to talk to high school students, I tell them to become consultants. Yeah, don't, it's a much better field than most anything else that I can think of at this moment. It's crazy.
Is the fire station, did we give that up or do we have to do that one too?
Long-term lease.
Yeah, so do we have ADA requirements we have to meet there as the building owner?
Yeah, I mean, it would have to, so that would be another one, so I guess 6.
Keep adding them.
Another
There's-
$20,000.
There's another 20 grand.
It's right next to the PD, so
Yeah,
you can
they
do it
don't have
in one
to
shot.
mow
Yep, yep.
They're gonna charge you for that?
Yeah, mow it, Debo. Strike the tents, let's go home. Okay,
So the next piece has not been formally approved yet, but it is in the budget tentatively, and that's the police technology grant. Once it's finally approved by those that have the power, then we'll be able to do it. If they do not approve it, which it sounds like there's a high likelihood that they will approve it, then we wouldn't spend it if we didn't get it. So
what's it buying?
it is replacing our MDTs as well as
Or
cameras.
what?
MDTs, so the computers in the actual vehicles. So it's gonna replace all of those as well as cameras at the school districts themselves. Okay, I'm gonna let her.
It'll be additional cameras, so we'll add cameras to the skate park, so we have visibility all the way around skate park, community center. Adds cameras to Kiwanis Park, plus the Wi-Fi capability needed to have the cameras at Kiwanis. And then it does $300,000 of that is the radio repeaters in the 2 schools for the police and fire communications with the school district.
300,000 of the 413 is just repeaters in 2 schools. So what about the other schools?
According to the school district, when the chief did the analysis, they only had 2 schools with major issues. So Daybreak and the high school.
Yeah, that's what
Well, yeah, but
Mr. McCoy in the city limits, but who's the first responders to Amboy Middle School, City of Battleground? Who's the first responders to Tubes, City of Battleground? Who's gonna be the first responders to any of these schools around here? It's gonna be the City of Battleground. And so now I agree, these are the ones that are inside the city, but this needs to be a conversation with the school district saying, look, dude, we can't communicate in your schools. We don't just care about the 2 that are in Battleground or 3 that are in Battleground.
We'd be surprised if Prairie doesn't have the same issue.
Yeah.
They probably do, yeah.
So I think we need to, you know, it shouldn't be our money.
Right.
If we get grant money for it, great, we'll help them, but the school district needs to understand that. And like Mr. Mayor said last time is we need to let them know. Like, if we have an issue in your other schools, we've told you there's an issue there. So that it's not on us later.
And we could probably work with CFM to help lobby on behalf of the school district to assist with some of the other schools as well.
But they pull in $250 million a year
Yeah.
in tax money.
Yep.
If they can't find somewhere under the couch cushion in $250 million, the money to do it themselves, then I really do think, as we've spoken, we need to send them a letter stating our position so that just in case something happens.
Yeah,
let's-
I agree.
Let's just have the conversation first. It may be something they're already talking about, because I
Yes.
know the superintendent's aware of it,
Yes,
so.
and then, yes, that'll be fine. I hear you.
So he's also aware of the other school lead too, or?
They're pretty much all identical, aren't they? I mean, all those schools are pretty much built the same.
No, the 2005 bond, there's several that are the same. Amboy Tubes, Captain,
Yeah,
Daybreak are all
yeah,
the same,
yeah. So if you have problems that.
but it's the high
Well,
schools.
What about Lauren and Pleasant Valley? Those
Those are huge,
schools are, yeah.
but that's, That's just why I bring it up, so.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So I have a question.
Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
get clarification on what the repeaters are? Is that like, so the radio, there's reception?
Yes.
Is there other ways to communicate?
Yeah, with line of people.
Cell phones or?
In a crisis type situation, which what we're talking about,
Can't be dialing.
I mean.
the
we're
radio is the
speaking-
primary way to get information out to
Yeah.
the entire, everybody responding. And to speak to the other schools, I don't know that the radios don't work in those
Yeah.
schools.
Correct.
The ability to talk on a radio in Amboy is just as good as it is to talk next to Cressa itself, depending on the
Yeah.
environment. So it may be that the schools are built, or where they sit, different things like that can affect that. So they may not need repeaters in those schools, but the repeaters in these schools that we're talking about are to amplify essentially the signal from the radio so that it gets out of that school.
Well, isn't there also I look at the issues that they had down in Texas. They need to be able to, those are recorded channels too, correct? The radio
Yeah.
channels. And so to be on your cell phone or texting or something else like that,
You lose
from a
that.
public records standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really just the mass communication.
Yeah.
If I want to talk to the 10 of you, I can't call you all at once.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
responding units have to be able to hear from the one person to be.
And at what point do you expect that coming through?
We're supposed to hear by December if the bill passes.
So it's the 300,000 comes to us and the contract will be through us, or is it just a pass through?
It'll be through us and pass through to the school district to do the work. The funding will come.
Is there any other places in the city? We've talked about this before of repeaters throughout the city. Is there any other places in the city that we have, such as big buildings like Walmart or things like that, where we have dead zones?
I'm not familiar with any. Vancouver Clinic is a little bit sketchy in some spots, but it can literally be room to room.
Yeah.
Depending on what's in there. So my experience on patrol is the schools, the high school primarily is, and then we saw with Daybreak, it's pretty significant in there too, but the high school is the main issue. And I don't know, I haven't been into Anderson's Dairy in many years, things like that, I don't know, but I think we would have heard through the fire industry, especially if that were.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
true.
Okay.
Legacy, we had some, the clinic, that's the free clinic now, we had some areas in that building, that small building that had some dead zones as well. I think there's probably a lot of those type of issues around the city.
So the next item is more of an accounting transition. Instead of being its own fund, fire impact fees will now reside in the general fund, just as like in and out. We collect the revenue and then we pass it through to the district. So that's just moving that into the general fund, so it's no longer a standalone fund.
There's not a cost of business in doing that.
In the pass through, we charge them $50 and then per each actual impact fee we collect, it's another fee on top of that. So yes, there is an administrative fee that we collect on. And then the last item is just the ARPA funding for the water and sewer projects that are planned to be moving along in 2023. So this is just the next phase for the equalization basin as well as the reservoir and then the wells.
That's just going to be banked until we come to those bridges.
Correct. So that's the next stage of those projects. Are there any questions about any of these general fund items? Anything in the general fund you'd like to discuss before we move on?
I'd like to discuss I wasn't here at the last meeting, but the parking enforcement officer.
Okay.
Is there a way, and I'll preempt what's gonna be said, that we can't hire somebody if we have a non-permanent position? But I would like to see that position myself be a temporary position for a trial basis and say, hey, we're gonna do it. We can authorize it for 2023 and say, we're gonna see what it does. Whoever you hire, say, look, if you want to keep this job, I would suggest that you do parking enforcement. Right? And we can see what that looks like. But I hate to put in full-time positions right now. since we met with our state lobbyists, we went from a 6% interest rate to a 7+% interest rate. We're seeing the economy inflation is worse and worse. I don't know if anyone's still saying I'm sure they are. There's a group of people saying that this isn't going to be what 2007 and 8 were, but there was a lot of people wrong in 2007 and 8. I hate to add full-time positions that it would be the first positions cut to a year later. So is there a way for us to do that where it's just temporary for a year or so?
We did that with the building inspector position that we added back in June. We did a 2-year limited term position. So, and that was why, because we wanted to make sure that we had an out if development didn't continue to happen. So we did it 2-year limited, and obviously if development continues, then we would increase that term of that position. So we could always take a look at something like that. If we do a 1-year limited or maybe a 2-year and then reevaluate.
Because I like that better than just adding full-time positions. That, I mean, Mark, you were here, I think, during the recession when we had to cut positions, and I remember your predecessor being very unhappy with losing, I think it was 2 or 3.
Yeah, there were 2 in engineering. I don't believe any in ops, but there were definitely 2 in engineering.
And I remember that conversation, and it, you know, that's a tough one to have for the city, for the, you know, for us as a council. But hey, we're laying people off or firing people because. So I would rather see it as a temporary position for a year or 2, whatever council. You know, if council wants to do it full time, that's great. But just to see how it goes and then determine that from there, because once we put it in.
Well, didn't you say before that we can always eliminate? if
Yeah.
we-
And you know, we did a lot of thinking about this in particular discussion when we were looking at the budget, because yeah, we don't, it's uncertainty of what we're going into, right? And we didn't want to add a bunch of positions that we may have to take off the books. But on the flip side of this too, this is one that it's kind of, it'll be specialized as a parking enforcement officer, can also back up regular code enforcement. And this actually puts us back to where we were back in 2008 when we laid off people originally, because we had 2 at that time too. So as we were trying to go through these positions, figuring out what the highest priority was to continue moving forward, knowing that if we do go into a recession or a downturn, then we may have to cut some positions at some point, so.
And I was looking at this year's budget, the remainder of this year, looking at what we have. I would almost, maybe as we get a next meeting or whatever, start this person immediately, rather than waiting for January. Maybe we do it because there looks like, and again, when I look at this year's budget as it is, unless there's a spending spree somewhere in the next 2.5 months, we're going to roll in pretty well. And so there very well may be enough money at 115 divided by 12, that's roughly 8.5, 9, to finance this person starting in December. Yes, ma'am.
So can you explain to Shane where this person's gonna be located, who they're gonna be under and all that stuff? Cause I thought that was helpful.
Yeah, so the parking enforcement officer will be located in the police department. They're creating a specialty unit. They'll be underneath of the detective sergeant as well as the administrative lieutenant. So they'll have 2 direct contacts. That will help because the detective sergeant is days, so they'll all be on day shifts, so they'll have that oversight. We're gonna write the job descriptions, if approved, to be basically a code compliance officer, one with a parking enforcement specialty, the other with the municipal code enforcement, so they can back each other up. So vacations and so forth, they can be each other's backup. And if we get to a point where parking enforcement is taken care of and it's not a full-time job, they can assist on the other side with animal control and with land use and code enforcement, building code enforcement as well. So that's kind of the overall plan. And then we would continue to have the existing code enforcement officer housed in community development to do more of the wetlands and animal control and planning, building type stuff. So.
Which I don't have a problem with that. Do I think I think we need a second code enforcement officer, but this goes back to 5 years ago, when we were told we needed to contract $100-something thousand with the county because we needed an animal control. So we could have code enforcement, and our animal issues are not near what they were. So I'm always apprehensive to. I think parking is good. I think that's a good start, but you know, I don't think. I don't know. I just think it should be, when we add permanent positions, then you're adding that permanent position. And so it's better to just leave it temporary and see if it's gonna work than it is to go all in and find out, well, it didn't work, but it's still a permanent position. And you know, I'd rather see it just temporary for now and see how it goes.
Do we have a vehicle for this person?
We have been looking at one of the little three-wheel parking enforcement vehicles to see if we could pick up a used one to.
Gotta get a Polaris. I think that would be that.
We talked about that too. Chief was a little apprehensive because they're geared so low and they're a little loud, but you know, you can't do any stealthy parking enforcement that way, but we could definitely reach out to them.
That would serve a dual purpose.
Yeah, that's been on the table for conversation.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe it's on the next slide, but I did my homework. I did watch the last meeting, but I was so curious about the street person. If we have a budget surplus, why are we putting that in TBD in a fund that's potentially temporary versus putting that in the general?
So the street is its own fund. So there's a street fund and then the TBD is its own fund as well. So it's a street fund and then the TBD fund. So it's actually two separate funds. So the street maintenance worker is actually in the street fund, which is funded primarily by the general fund. So it's just the maintenance piece of the road, so it pays for the operations of maintaining the road,
Is any
not the
TBD money
actual-
going towards that position?
No, the TBD funding right now is strictly for the actual preservation work unless council wants to use it for something.
No, I misunderstood that. My bad.
I think we're moving on.
So looking at our overall governmental debt, this is just a pretty quick slide. This is just what's budgeted for what we're paying next year in debt. And one of our debts, the Public Works Trust Fund loan, will be paid off next year. So then our only remaining debt that is funded with basically general fund money is the Scott and Way, which actually we use TIP to pay for that. So
How much longer do we have on Scott?
till 2030. We still are getting the IRS subsidies with that as well.
So it's not worth paying off. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. That's not what we're paying off. We're paying off the.
No, it's not worth paying
Oh,
off.
Correct. No. Not at this time.
That's the only debt we have, $640,000.
For the governmental activities, yes, we do have a revenue debt for the water fund as well as a USDA debt for the sewer fund, but for this side of the house.
For general fund debt.
For general fund,
essentially, yeah.
that's all we're carrying. I hate to say all, but that's,
We don't have any.
well, and compared to probably other places in the county, I think we're doing fairly well.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. Paying off the park bond as well as the city hall bond has been tremendous for the city. Because we're not, this is our only debt. Very rare to see that, so.
Yeah.
So looking at the street / TBD, again, the TBD is its own separate fund. We do track that separately from the actual street fund itself, just so we can highlight what we're getting in as well as what we're expending. So we do have the one FTE additional maintenance worker. And then the pavement preservation contracted work is in the budget at 1.1 million, which is the same as it was this year. And then the contract work crack seal versus the temporary staff, we have budgeted in at 200,000. And then we do have some capital equipment in the budget that's going to be split with other divisions. So we have a backhoe that would be split amongst the five different divisions of public works. And then a tractor that's just split with storm. And then a trailer, again, all five divisions, and then a utility vehicle that would be split with storm as well. And then we have streetlight repair. We do have a backlog of streetlight repairs. We have that in the budget, 45,000. The theory being that instead of waiting for insurance to reimburse us when folks hit those, paying for it up front and then getting reimbursed from the insurance company so they don't sit broken. And then we have a concurrency mitigation transfer to capital projects of 990,000. That's money that developers pay to the city for work they aren't doing as part of their development, but they have to as part of their development plan. And then we hold those funds and it goes towards those overall projects. So we're holding money for Eaton Boulevard and Forest Grade at this time. So we're just budgeting to move that money to the capital project to offset the cost of the city. Are there any questions about any of these items or things you want to talk about in the street fund?
To fix every street light, Mark, would cost us how much? How many are we down now?
So it was about at that backlog price, there was about 3 years. We'll knock off a third with this year's budget. The second third will be with next year's budget, and then hopefully
There's
last third.
$130,000 worth of street lights down.
Yeah, they're about $3 or $4 grand to replace a light. And
we're
I
down
think
40.
we're at 40-ish, give or take.
How many of those have we had insurance claims for?
Nowadays it's about 50-50. I would say a lot of those are like older ones that we're catching up on. But the ones that kind of happen now, I would say it's about 50-50 that we get somebody who's either admits to it, the police get them because it's a drunk driving issue, something like that, or somebody will see it and say, hey, I saw Joe Blow do it. But there's definitely still a handful that are, hey, the light's down in the street. No one knows what happened to it.
Can we give a $2,000 reward? It's half the cost of a light, give a
Well,
$2,000
we,
reward.
we
to
did
turn
that
someone
right over here when they took out the school sign.
Oh,
We put a reward out and I believe the girlfriend turned her boyfriend. in.
Right.
Love
X,
love has very, very
It's
little
X.
cost.
That was an awkward.
Well, unless you get married. When you say contract work for crack seal versus temp staff, what does that mean?
So next year, we're proposing to do the crack seal with a contractor versus having staff do it. Couple reasons for that. One is just we've been having trouble getting temporary staff. It continues to be a problem. And two, our crack seal trailer is at the end of its life. And so we're trying to figure out what the best way forward is with that. We can't get parts for it anymore. It's at an age where they just don't make any of that stuff, and finding used parts is becoming difficult. So to kind of help us get caught up, we're proposing to do a contracted for a year.
So do we get more professional work from professional service people?
Our guys do a good job. So I think the work is equivalent. Typically, it's cheaper for us to do it. We actually saw, though, a good bid from City of Washougal this year. An amazingly low price for a private company to do it. And everything I've heard, they were very happy with the work. So, if we can get the same contractor, I think we'll be satisfied with the work, and it will help us get caught up, especially with the new TBD money coming in. It'll be good to get ahead.
So on that same one, do we need to get a new crack seal machine if we're gonna?
That's something that I want to look into. I think a brand new is 75,000. We had pretty good luck getting the used one that we did. So I want to look into it, research it more, see what the best path to go is.
Because if we're only doing this for a year, my concern is that, I mean, it's tough to get stuff right now. And it may be tough 6 months from now. So if we need something for 2024, then we
Should
may need
look
to
at it.
order it sooner than later, or we're gonna be doing this again in 2024 if we decide to go back to us doing it.
Yeah, I'll have Todd look into that, see what the, used versus new, to kind of see where we're at.
Yes, ma'am.
sorry. Is that something that we can use TBD funds to buy?
Yeah, we did last time.
Yeah, from Sherwood. And what's the UTV for? Is a four-wheel
that'll-
drive truck not good enough?
No, so actually this will help with efficiency. So we'll generally use it for spraying, litter pickup and watering. And what it does is typically when we're doing weed killing spraying, we're having people with backpacks walk around. you'll actually be able to have somebody do it from a vehicle now just to increase efficiency. Same with watering. And then we'll have the benefit of, special events and emergencies having it.
Where you getting it for 15,000?
It's on state bid. It's a Kubota, like with a Trek bed
Yeah.
type version, but yeah, it's from the state bid.
Any other questions? We're flipping slides.
So the capital projects fund, I apologize for the small nature of the project. The majority of these projects are carryover from prior years that have just, they've been on this list for a long time, and we're finally getting to the construction phase, such as the shared use pathway is no longer on here, which is very exciting because that's been on here since I started. So good to see that off. And then next year, the hope is that our 502, 503 falls off as well, along with the neighbors. So very exciting coming ahead for the coming year. We do have some additional projects on here. We did include the Southwest 20th Avenue project for the sidewalks, just the design phase, with the theory being that if we do get the grant, we can move forward with that project. If we don't get the grant, we'll fund it with the funds that we have on hand. So we just budgeted for the design based upon what we're gonna have to do with mitigation and so forth. So that's on here as well. We do have, for the first time, again, this is my time here, some parks projects on here, which is very exciting. That would be funded with our park impact fees. We have a picnic shelter addition at Kiwanis, as well as Max McConnell Park. Both are picnic shelter additions. And then we also have two facility projects, the police station, HVAC replacement, the design, as well as the community center and HVAC repair. Other than that, the rest of these projects, other than I missed one. We do have an operations center expansion phase 1, the design portion of that for the op center to expand what is there currently. So are there any questions about these projects that are on here that we can answer for you?
What is the Southeast Clark one?
That's the, so if you're about 4th Street, there's kind of the gap. So you have Clark Avenue apartments, and then you have where VHA is going to build the new apartment. There's like this little gap in the road there. And so it's a
Okay.
CDBG project to finish that little, so
Okay.
4th and Clark and everything ties together.
Oh, I remember that now. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
So is that supposed to be Northwest 20th and Northwest Ninth? That's the roundabout thing?
Yeah, that's the compact roundabout.
Okay.
And then you'll see to the right, that's the funding sources. So we have close to $10 million, or just over $10 million between state and federal grants, and then local funds that we're matching with.
Okey-doke.
So the park funds, the highlights out of there is we do have the 1 FTE, the lead maintenance worker, as well as the second ADA transition plan for the parks to get those up to ADA standards. And then we have parks plans as recommended by the master plan for Remy, Durkee, and Gardner Oak Parks. Those can be paid for with TIF dollars as well. And then we have some parks plan recommended park repairs such as bathrooms, as well as some other miscellaneous projects that Mark can go into for you. And then we have the other portions of those shared equipment off the backhoe and the trailer. And then we also have new tables for the community center in there as well. So, questions, more detail?
What do we get for $624,000? That's beyond me. What are we getting, Mark?
So for those 3 parks, what you'll end up with is a master plan for each of them. From that, you can pick and choose. So looking at kind of the number of houses and what the anticipated park impact fee will be, we're going to bring in about $1 million, $800,000 to $1 million of park impact fees a year. And so having those parks master plans in place, you'll start to be able to pick off improvements at those. And so it's essentially setting you up with a plan. So rather than just kind of building willy-nilly, we know what we want to build at those parks. It'll go through a public process so that citizens get to have input on what goes there, and then you'll have essentially a blueprint, for lack of a better word, to work from. And we can bite it off with the park impact fees as they come in.
And it helps us become more eligible for grants.
That's a good point. Yeah. So any RCO grant, CDBG, it helps with those.
So who has to do that? Like if we tell you, Mark, put a plan together to put picnic shelters and ball fields on the Durkee property. And you go, okay, I'm gonna put ball fields here, I put picnic shelters here, here's your master plan. Is that all we need, or do we actually have to have somebody, do we have to show that we paid $300,000 to have somebody do that so we can apply for grants?
No, I mean, it can be whatever method you have to get there, it can do it. So one of the things we talked about was the long range planner being able to do a portion of that. The concern is that in the amount of time it takes to hire anyone, that sort of thing it'll take a while to get there. So at this point, the full budget is still in there. But yeah, any sort of mixture of consultant staff can generally do, if you had enough people, staff could do most of it. There's a couple things that typically can. It's like there's some architectural stuff like the drawings and that sort of thing. We just don't have the software to do that. There's a large communications piece. So, unless you're going to take all of like Alicia's time to try to set something up, it helps to have a consultant to help with that. So there's definitely a big chunk that staff can do if you have the long range planner. Just the concern is the timing to get them on board.
Yeah, and this is one that we talked about a lot when we added that FTE for the long range planner. We took $100,000 out of the master plan. We talked about taking funding out of this too. But we did leave this one in here because with not having that person on board, getting time for the recruitment, handing them the master plan, and then potentially 3 big park master plans in the first year might be a little too much for one person to bite off while they're getting trained up and familiar with the community. So our hope is to not have to spend all of this on the master plans and be able to utilize that position. But with the unknowns, we kind of just left the budget at this point. But our plan moving forward be using that long range planner to do more of this type of thing.
Could always make that as part of their application process.
5 big plans in 1 year.
Well, I just look at it, it's so like, I remember when I first came on council, we were looking at the Scott Way project. It was being done, and I asked between low bids, right? There was like $1.5 million if you took all the low bids. I said, why are we not doing that? Well, because you'd have to have somebody on staff to be able to basically be the project manager on that, right? I'm like, well, for $1 million, we can do that. For 100, we've just seen for $112,000, you're getting a maintenance worker. So if you could take 150, we're saving 124, we're saving the $500,000, and that person works for us for a year doing plans instead of just blowing $600,000 and sending it out to someone. Just hire them as a temporary, once again, a temporary employee. That this is what we're looking for. And when this job is done, or a contracted employee, when this job is done, and not pay $624,000. Because I look at Remy, there's not much to do at Remy because it's all wetlands. It's a trail and some interpretive stuff, right? That's what we're looking for.
So about where that existing trail is now, the south of that is upland, and it doesn't have the conservation covenant on it. So there's some area in there to be able to build.
So
it's not a ton, but yeah, anything south of where you see the trail now.
Right against Scott.
Yeah, right against Scott. Yeah.
So we're gonna put a playground right against that road.
We'll put a big fence up.
Fence, right?
Well, we approve this. Come next October, you bring us this, 3 binders, 3 different places. And then you're going to bring us a budget to put these into action.
Yeah, that's the plan, is to, once we have the plans for it, then start moving forward based on whatever park impact fee we bring in.
You weren't here 11 years ago with the water reclamation plan, the 500 pages that we paid for.
I was here.
Were you here? Yeah, the 500 pages probably still sitting back there somewhere. It was a killer. And so every time I see, especially $625,000, plans. It scares me because, we spent 200 grand for a plan and then we have no money to implement the plan. And then by the time we have the money to implement the plan is 3 years outdated. So the three of you see this, there's going to be enough money to at least put one of these plans into action, starting in January of 24.
Yeah, if we keep building houses, we'll keep bringing in park
If we
impact
keep
fees
building
and,
houses.
yeah.
If we don't, if building slows or stops, then the plan sits.
But this also gives us the ability, there's a lot of money out there for Parks and Recreation for grants. So this at least, we'll still have the money to make those matches. And this will set us up to be successful then for those.
And
grants.
who amongst us is qualified to write those grants?
They're not,
Are we going to hire someone?
we would write them in-house, our department.
Yeah, I
heads
mean,
would
at
write them.
this point, I've pretty much written every grant we've done, so I assume I would continue on with it.
Yes, ma'am.
I know, I keep talking.
No, you're fine.
So this is all our visioning process and everything coming together, right? This is everything we worked for to surveying the citizens, what they wanted for parks, and this is just continuing with that.
And Mark, like you said, I mean, once these are built out, those park impact fees, basically it pays for this and then some. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, the park impact fees
Yeah.
pay for it, yeah.
Okey-doke. Anyone else? We've got about 4 minutes for
Get one more question.
whatever your next slide is.
See. So the drainage fund, this is actually it's pretty short. We have a railroad ditch maintenance, main to Rasmussen of 175,000. We do have some skate park drainage repairs for 25,000, and then 2 capital projects, Dual Creek bypass the design, and then the railroad ditch stormwater facility design of that. And then the capital equipment, which we already talked about, the other half or piece of that for sharing that equipment. So are there any questions about those projects or anything about the drainage fund in general? And I will say again that our operational expenses that I'm not talking about tonight have stayed relatively steady year over to year. So these are the one-time expenditures that are increasing our budget essentially.
At one point, 2 or 3 years ago, we spoke about the properties on the north side of Eaton, right between, by the school bus barn and where it floods. We were going to talk about those properties instead of building expensive ditches and whatever else, just, I assume at that point, and again, I'm no engineer, we were talking about just floodplaining that and letting it
I see.
go. So did we, obviously, we've decided we're not playing that game anymore if we're going back to the $175,000 ditch.
So this is for design and it's just called
that's for
railroad ditch
design.
because what it, that's where the water's coming from. So that's not off the table as looking at all options for it. But yeah, it's only called railroad ditch just because that's where all the water's coming to from off the hill. But yeah, any options on the table.
Which I think this is a different area than the main to Rasmussen.
So there's 2. I assume you're talking about the kind of 5th bullet point down.
Is that, it was 3 years ago. I can't remember now what it was. All I remember.
I
is
believe
we-
it's that one. Cause yeah, the first bullet point there is just the maintenance of the railroad ditch, the northern half.
Yeah. so-
The 5th one is that stormwater
yeah, it was
facility that
gonna be like
addresses the issue.
$300,000 for a 2-foot pipe somewhere going, I guess, toward the golf course. I can't remember. Or maybe $1 million. I can't remember at this point, but
Here's the railroad bridge or something.
so that's still in the thought process.
Yeah, we're gonna
This-
look at all options with that because we continue to have backups there and it's just getting worse and worse. So we need to do something.
And I can't stop beating the dead horse. The 200 grand is not going to turn one shovel worth of dirt.
Not at this point, no.
We're having some technical difficulties up here.
Yeah,
Yours is staying on, ours are-
Yeah.
Are you pushing buttons over there?
Any other questions for the 3 of them? Seeing no one, it's 6:54. We'll see you back at 7. Oh, thank you.
I totally forgot.
At 7 o'clock. If you join us, please, for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, let's see who's here, Ms. Cody.
Councilmember Davis. Here. Councilmember Cortez.
Present.
Deputy Mayor DeRochers. Here. Mayor Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Bowman.
Here.
Councilmember McCoy.
Here.
Councilmember Walters.
Here.
The roll has been called.
Thank you. Are there any additions or removals from the agenda? Hearing none, if I can get a motion to approve it as presented. Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Council member reports.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
The Columbia River Fish Recovery Board meeting was canceled, but if you did read the paper, you would see that they did get the money for the Ridgefield Pits restoration. So you can see it's the biggest project they've ever received. It's going to be somewhere around $12 to $15 million, include walking trails and a whole new river. So what would have taken nature 100 years to reform the course of that river, they'll hopefully do somewhat quicker than that.
And where is that?
Do you know where the Daybreak Park is? Right there, if you were to go north on 72nd, across the bridge.
Yes.
If you were there and you looked northeast,
You're gonna spend $15 million there?
it's a bunch of gravel pits that the river went into. And so they have to
Fill them in?
I don't know exactly what they're doing. It's
Wow.
above my pay grade, sir.
I understand that. Yes,
But like,
yes, ma'am.
so Philip and I both attended the ECHO meeting, which is the Indian Community Homelessness. We talked about the process to get people into shelter and what we can do, and then the county is looking for a space to host some RVs like they do over off of 18th and 136th, where people can stay there in the community. They have not found any space yet, so hopefully they'll find something. There's a waiting list of about 40 to 50 people to try to get into any of those spots, so it's desperately needed. Checked on availability for somebody in the city. No, there's nothing out there for anybody to move to, so hopefully they'll be able to expand those programs. I know they're wanting to work with the city of Vancouver to try to understand how they've been able to do it. So fingers crossed something will happen in the future. We'll be able to have places for people to go.
Thank you. It looks like we're moving on to you, Ms. Urban.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. First up, we have a presentation from Ms. Peterson and Ms. Smith regarding a design for the Main Street banner. They've been working with the Parks and Community Engagement Advisory Board. So I'm
That's
gonna
not very
turn it over
Christmas.
to them. It covers several.
Hello. Hi, my name's Kim Cedarholm, and I am the Recreation and Facility Manager for the Parks and Recreation Department. I don't know if I've met all of you. So the Main Street banner was basically driven by the community members notifying us that they want their holiday banner back. Say holiday. So it was driven by them. I've been working with the PACE board and they've given their input with the design, the font, the kind of the overall look. So we have gathered that information. They've worked real hard on it, and we have then brought all of our request to Alicia and for the design element. And Alicia has a presentation for you to kind of show you where we started and where we ended up, and then hopefully get your blessing so we can move forward on this.
So Kaylee's gone ahead and pulled up the presentation here. So the Main Street banner was initially presented, the first concepts were presented to the PACE board on September 14th. Kaylee, slide 2 is going to show us what the initial design concepts were. I took this information, and on slide 3, you will see I compared it to the current street banners that we have. These are the ones that hang along the street lights along Main Street. The consistency that I saw across all of these were red is used throughout, and then also you'll see some snowflake designs in the back. So I focused on that when I came up with some options for them. The next slide were the preliminary designs that I presented to the PACE board. The first one being their favorite, depicting the snowflakes. Again, that's bringing those red and the snowflakes. I also wanted to give them a couple of different options, so I threw stars in there, and then the bottom one is a basic design if they wanted to focus more on the text. The next slide is going to show, of course, their favorite snowflake design with some font options. Again, you'll see outlined in green, the script font was their favorite font. It was a little bit more bold, it stood out. Some critiques we had on that font was they wanted a different S and a different G, something that was just a little bit more clear to read. And then also see if we couldn't bring a little bit more of a thick, bold font to it. So as you're driving by, it's a little bit more legible. So what we're presenting you today is the final proposed designs. These are a whimsical, we're calling it a whimsical script font and a cursive script font, just to kind of get your feedback. Now, bear in mind, this is just something that I designed on an iPad. We're going to send this to a graphic designer, so the fonts may change slightly, but we're just hoping to get some of your feedback, what you like, what you don't like, some things that you might want to change in it, and just your overall opinion of the banner itself.
I have a question. I assumed we were gonna go with another lighted one. Is that out of the options? Our last one was lights, season's greetings, and it had clear lights.
That was gonna be my question, one of my questions
I mean, I thought
too.
we had to have a power run to it and everything.
I didn't either. It was powered?
Yeah,
It-
it was more like it wasn't a banner, it was like a sign.
It was,
You know, like.
Oh, yes, you're right. Okay.
So that's not an option any longer?
Kim, sorry, I don't want to jump in, but Kim and I did have a sidebar conversation about that. One of the pieces that the PACE board did want to incorporate in this was lights. They were also familiar with the same light. I know exactly the sign you're talking about too. This year's budget, we were capped around that $2,000 with an unknown future budget to do a more elaborate sign. So we were just trying to create this to work within those budget.
This is just a temporary banner? Or
I didn't realize that it was lighted, but this is a very hard banner.
this, yeah,
So I don't know if with this, it could be like, the weight itself. It was more like a string type deal and
cables. It's run by cables, and then other people
Right.
would put their signs like this on the cables, like for the Beat, Battleground High School, Boosters Clubs, that kind of stuff.
I think that's why we had the issues though. Is because we had a 3-ton sign on a 2-ton pole.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what caused the issue is the poles were shaking so much they came off from the ground.
On the current build bid, is there electricity included in there somewhere?
There
Plug it in?
isn't, but it would be easy to replace because if you look at it, there's like a wire running from the power pole to this and the future location of the poles is about the same spot. So I would imagine it would just be rewiring it the same.
I first of all, thank you for this. This is great. I appreciate the work on this. I'd be in favor of utilizing this as a temporary fix, but I could already see and hear this constituents in my ears saying, oh, they have they got the one with the lights and everything. Now they're putting this one up that, and I'm not saying this as a reflection of your work, but they'll probably say, this is a cheap fix, right? Yeah.
That word was.
And so, I mean, if we're talking about spending $624,000 on reports, we got to give them the budget to do this, do it right.
Yeah,
So.
I agree.
Right.
So maybe we go back and
How much is this one?
2,100.
2,100?
Yeah.
What's the width of this?
I don't have it at my
The
fingertips.
the overall was 40 feet,
40 feet and the
Okay.
height,
40. So 40 by 4,
and then with the little cutouts, so it doesn't become a sail.
correct. And then we anticipate grommets along the whole top line so that it doesn't also wave.
And this would be double-sided or just one side if it goes on the community center?
Double-sided.
And then we can just keep using it each year at the community center? Cause I do like this. It's just, the lights,
Yeah, I
We-
grew up with the lights, so
we
I
could
know
all-
much about it.
We could also, if we do just use it at the community center, we can make it shorter.
Oh, okay, yeah, so that'd be 40 feet.
Would it be possible to get a design together with kind of more of what we're looking at, like the old looking, so I'm sure we have pictures of it somewhere.
I was trying to find it, but
Um,
I grew up here. I know exactly the sign you're
yeah.
talking about.
So, I mean, if we could even have something kind of ready to go to put out something to say, hey, we are still working on this and this is what we want to deliver to you guys, but it has to be the right way. So, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I do want to have that communication before people start thinking about it at Christmas time. And, yeah, I think that's kind of the direction I'd like to see it.
And for me particular, I don't mind spending more money on the sign. That's gonna be something that's very iconic to the city and it's gonna last a long time, right?
And nobody's forgotten the other one
No, it comes up every year.
every year.
Is that something though? Because there's a great difference in weight. When you start talking these signs, well, it's not the lights, it's what's holding the light. And so, if you're doing some type of metal that's holding that light, what that is that something that needs to be? We need to factor that in for the design of the poles.
There's companies that actually specifically do those type of things, though. I researched it a couple years ago, and there are specific companies that just do these city type light banners.
But we need to know what for the poles, if we're gonna do that, we need to know what the weight of that is so that we don't end up in the same, cause you could go have a welding shop build it, but it might weigh too much for the pole.
Yeah, so we base the design off generally a banner. So once they get kind of an idea of what it's gonna look like, then I can go back to the structural engineer and just confirm that it will support it the way it is. Or if we have to upgrade it, then we can before we build it.
Yeah, cause if we're gonna, if they're made for this banner, that may have a different load than.
Yeah.
Than the lights with whatever they're using, whether it be plastic, metal, whatever.
I'm sure there's a Christmas light consult that can, they can, can help.
200 grand.
Yeah, we'll just, ho our way right into
Where's it?
$250,000.
Where's a green suit?
So, so the plan is, which one, A or B, I guess, is what they're looking for to begin with.
Yes, sir.
I
That
like
would be
A.
B for me.
Which one's one?
Oh, I said B.
B, okay.
There's a B on my left. How about you, Mr. McCoy? A B on your, come on. 2 Bs.
Sure. The same. B.
I mean, I like them both, but.
I'm an A, so that makes me a not to B.
So two.
So there's 3 Bs, an A,
An A.
2 As.
No preference. The
Pick
artist
one,
did a
sir,
wonderful
please.
job.
They made me pick here.
Pick one, sir.
B.
Okay, so and Ms. Davis, that makes 4 Bs. So,
Yeah, that's fine. They're both really nice.
Yes.
so we're into B.
Thank you so much.
And if it's just going on the community center, then it's half width.
Yeah, we'll scale
Yeah.
it to where it fits
Need
perfectly.
a 40-footer. I'm like.
But we'll do it because above the kitchen door where.
That's around it.
Thank you. Pleasure having you.
Damn it.
They could put it down the ladder truck. They lift the ladder.
Yeah, let's ask the consultant. Citizens communications. Doesn't look like there are any this evening, so we're moving on to the consent agenda. Does anyone see anything that needs to be withdrawn?
To approve.
There's a move to approve from Mr. Bowman and a move from second from Mr. McCoy. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Moving on. CDBG.
Thank you, Mayor Johnston. I'm going to turn it over to our Public Works Director, Mr. Husting. Kaylee, can you take the presentation down, please?
Good evening, everyone. Give me a second. I'll share my presentation.
Christmas spirit still with us.
I see yours.
Yeah, can you guys see mine on the screen up here?
You see those reading.
We're still under the. It's thinking.
Why don't you act it out for us?
You don't want to see that.
Improv.
Here we go.
Mime. We prefer mime though, if you're gonna do it.
Hey, I can be quiet. That works for me.
He's an engineer.
All right, tonight is our second meeting for CDBG and also our public hearing. The agenda, I'll go over the possible projects, timeline, we can do the public hearing, and then we can do questions and comments. So just as a reminder, first project is Northeast First Street from Third Avenue to Central Park. It's essentially a continuation of a previous CDBG project. It would put in place about 585 feet of sidewalk and curb and gutter. One of the questions that Planning Commission asked is how big a gap would that leave to the sidewalk by the church? It's approximately 200 feet. Engineers estimates 420. So assuming we want to do a match of 50%, it would be 210. About 10,000 of that can come from our staff time, so our match for the work that we do, and then 200,000 in funds, and that can be TIF, TBD, or general fund. The second project is Kiwanis Park. Essentially, we'd be looking at building an all-weather, all-year picnic table cover. So right now we have a trellis that isn't, it's got holes in it essentially. So during the winter, it doesn't provide any cover for the picnic tables. We'd additionally rehab the horseshoe pit area. So we would add a multi-purpose area and then replace some of the covered horseshoe pits. If you've been out there, the current covers are getting old and starting to fall apart, got bends in them, pieces of the wood are missing. So our estimate on that is 380,000. Again, assuming the 50% match, we would do 190. For that one, there'd be about 6,000 in staff time and then 184,000 in funds. And that's in the parks plan, so we can use park impact fees as our match. The third project is the Hidden Glen Park pedestrian bridge replacement. That bridge was previously removed due to damage and vandalism. It's approximately 40-foot span. Engineers estimate on that is 120,000. For a 50% match, it would be about 5,000 in staff time and then 55,000 in funds. That one did end up being in the parks plan as well, so it is park impact fee eligible, and then general fund could be used as well. So our timeline, we've had both the initial presentations for council and planning commission. So right now we're at the council public hearing. So unless there's any questions, I believe we can move on to the public hearing.
We'll open up the public hearing on this. Is there anyone that wishes to opine? John? No can do? Okay, no opining from John. We're going to close the public hearing and then we'll move on to questions and we'll start with Ms. Walters.
I don't.
Oh, I didn't remove you from the last time. Sorry about that.
Oh.
Then we'll move on to Mr. Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like option one, and there's two reasons I like option one, because it does complete more of that sidewalk along there. That we started, we went from Parkway to First last time, correct? No, we went
I think it
because,
goes all the way to Third.
but wasn't that already in? There was like a gap.
There was a section in,
And I think the
I think we
apartment
went
section was
Parkway
in.
first and then
then
second,
second and
third, or
third, yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that project, and one of the reasons for council members who have not had the opportunity to go on the bus tour and figure out how you get this funding. They put everyone in a bus from the cities, they take you around and you explain why you need this funding. And whoever tells the best story usually gets the funding. And I don't see this is a kids walking to school, using a sidewalk, those type of things, versus, hey, we got a park that we want to fix a shelter on. And, that's usually one of the last things that they do. So you'll see, like, I'll never forget when I went on it, we went to Ridgefield, and Ridgefield still had dirt streets and wanted sidewalks to get these kids to school. And you're like, man, we're asking for a park, and they want to get kids to school safely. So score this, I think number one would score better than the other ones. And so when it goes before everybody, so I think number one is a better project. It doesn't mean the other ones aren't, but I think it's better for scoring purposes.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
What did planning commission go with?
They have not made a decision yet. So when we have our third meeting, I'll bring theirs, but they were 50-50 for the first two. And in fairness, there were 2 or 3 that were missing from the meeting. So it was only a handful, but yeah, they were dead split between the first 2 projects at this point.
So seeing the bridge this go around, I am interested in that, especially because of the price. I think that it's something that they would probably do. It's not $300,000 or whatever, so I feel like it has a good chance of being picked. I still am interested in the park updates as well.
Yes, ma'am. And yes, sir.
Just had a question on the First Street project. With us looking at making that potentially a couplet in the future, is this something that we would be putting in to tear out? Or is that so far in the future that it's probably never going to happen and we're not worried about it?
There's a couple of ways to answer. So we're building this to the major collector standards. So I think even if that became a couplet, I think the improvements would be in the right spot to do it. There's a bit of a risk there if something drastically changed, but just the width at what we're building this, I doubt that it would change in the future. Thank you.
Any other questions of Mark?
I just have a
Yes, ma'am.
comment real quick. So I do like the idea of the Hidden Glen bridge replacement. I did have a couple of the residents of that neighborhood reach out to me specifically about that. And it was one of those areas that, they're not able to cross that area going to and from school either. So that's another, I think, reason to get that done. The cost is lower and it's also a pedestrian friendly project. So that's all I have.
What's the width of that divide?
40 feet.
40 feet.
Yeah, the span, the creek's smaller, but to get from kind of end of trail to end of trail, it's about 40 feet.
Before I ask, Mr. Cortez, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just hear from planning commission what their official recommendation before I go ahead. I'm kind of leaning towards what Councilmember Bowman is favoring in terms of the sidewalk. But that park has, I don't know, so much has gone on, but didn't something happen in that park not too long ago where there was like vandalism or there was some
No, so-
controversy in that park, right?
So Hidden Glen is more of a natural area now. So they're at one point was like a picnic table and I think a small swing set or something like that. it's been rehabbed to more natural, so it got planted, things like that. So the path is still there, but it's more of a passive park than an active. It wouldn't have, you'd have benches in the trail, and then if you put the bridge, but there's not picnic tables or playground equipment. It's meant to be more passive than natural.
Okay. Cause I thought it was like there was a fire there or some vandalism.
I didn't hear of that if that happened.
Okay.
Maybe, I think there.
I know
was
that, I know the
a-
bridge was vandalized
Yeah,
quite a
they,
few
they
times.
destroyed
but
the bridge.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
yeah, that's why it's not there anymore. It got to a point where we just couldn't keep it up.
So if we did put a bridge in, what would make it different?
Part of why, I mean, I know it's the cheaper of the projects, but part of why this is so expensive for a 40-foot ped bridge is getting something that's more vandal deterrent, you know.
May I
Vandal
make a
proof.
suggestion to that? I think I made a suggestion the last time on that, and that was what's called a Bailey Bridge. What we used to build in the Army, and they held tanks, and they're just steel pieces that go together with 4x4 floors, 6x6, depending on what you want to use. You can't destroy one of those. Well, you can. RPG takes them out, but I don't think anyone here has an RPG. So you can buy Bailey bridges cheap online. And for 40 feet, that's roughly 3 spans. And they go up easy. They go up we put them up in the morning. So as long as you've got concrete piers on either side, which you would have, then we put them up in the morning. Of course, that's a little different, but I think you can probably do it for what you allocated there. And we could probably do it cheaper than that if CDBG doesn't pay for it and we just want to do it. And if they destroy the Bailey Bridge, then at that point we should be out of the business. Yes, ma'am.
So if I recall correctly, that area, somebody came in and planted a bunch of native plants and they were gonna do like tours with the schools and stuff. They're having kids come out and look at the,
Yeah, I know it did get planted back to the more natural. I don't know about the tours though.
cause I remember
not
we were
aware of
worried
that.
about the buses parking in the cul-de-sac. That,
Yeah,
so.
isn't there a set of apartments there at the end or something? We were concerned about parking for some
I
reason.
think it's all single family in that area, but there's 2 cul-de-sacs that
Yeah.
Oh,
park
this
joins
is
them
when-
together.
When Jeff was here, it was something he did, I think. But I'm just curious if we were doing that, if there are students coming and checking out our native plants and stuff.
I think the students were part of the planting. They did a lot of the work in the park and we did field trips and so forth where they assisted with the planting. I don't know about the ongoing tours. If that's
Okay.
something that's
So it sounds like, again, we're interested in all 3 of them. We'll wait and see what the planning commission says. The final decision is the first meeting in November, the
Correct.
7th. And then the drive around normally is like the 2nd Monday or 3rd Monday in January, if
Something
I
like
remember
that,
right,
yeah.
something to that effect. So, yeah, we can take care of that. Does anyone else have any other questions of Mark before we put this to bed and wait on the 7th of November? Seeing none. Moving on. The traffic impact fee update.
We're gonna stick with Mr. Hersig.
1 second. All right, so tonight I'm going to talk to you about the traffic impact fee calculation. So when we adopted the new transportation system plan, we came up with a whole list of new projects in that plan. So this is essentially setting up the traffic impact fee to be consistent with that. Kind of the first step in figuring out what the traffic impact will be your new trips. So only growth can pay for growth. And part of that is what are the new trips coming into the city based on that. So in looking at all the modeling, it states that there'll be about 408,000 new or future daily trips. Of that, there's about 176,000 that are existing, which means that about 231,000 are new, which is about just a little bit under 57%. So that's kind of the first number you take.
Is that one-way trips?
That,
Is that round trips?
that would be a one-way trip. So going to the store and going back to your house would be 2 trips.
And so we have problems now, and that's a projection of double.
Correct.
That, what's the timeline on that?
That's in the 20-year plan.
Okay, 20 years, okay.
Correct. No.
Not 2023, okay, good.
And with the, just to kind of answer that question further, so with the build out of the transportation plan, that addresses all of those issues. So if you build out all of the projects that are in here, you would meet level of service at all of the city's intersections. So essentially then you take all the projects from the transportation system plan. So I'll just kind of show you this one. This is the intersection projects that are in there. You go through and determine, and this is a staff driven process. So looking at all the projects, went through and determined which one makes sense to be TIF eligible. So typically those would be, you know, city capital projects or ones that kind of serve a bigger city interest. So your small neighborhood collector, which shows up in the plan, but is really only there to serve development. Developers pay for those. They're not traffic impact fee eligible. So that's kind of the thought process going through this. So you can see anyone that's selected as TIF eligible, the spreadsheet does the calculation and comes up with the traffic impact fee for that, and so on and so forth. So what I did is went through all the projects, did that calculation, and essentially came up with what TIF should fund, and did that for both intersections and segments. So going back to the first page, the total eligible cost is all of those projects, and the portion that's eligible for TIF ends up being about 82 million. We look at our existing debt, which is about 3.5 million. The existing TIF credits we have out there, 400,000. And then the existing TIF funds, so what's essentially in the bank account now, about 4.3 million. You add the debt and credits and then subtract off the TIF funds, and that gives us the total TIF costs, which ends up being about 82 million. So it was kind of a net neutral there. You divide that by the daily trips, and that comes up with a growth cost per trip of about $353 per trip. There's a cost adjustment factor. And so state law requires that if growth is paying for something else that might logically get used for transportation, then you have to subtract that off because it's not essentially fair to double dip. Kind of keeping the same modeling we did with the park impact fee, we said we collect REIT 2, about 20% can go to parks. So using kind of the same logic, 20% can go to transportation. That was converted into a per trip and subtracted off. So the net new TIF per trip is $347.04. This is fairly equivalent to what we would have had now under the old plan. I think Megan had it about $350 with inflation. So within a couple bucks, we're about exactly where we were under the old plan. So that's all I got with that. I'm happy to answer any questions related to it.
In a very slim nutshell, how is this funded? How is it pushed out? If we're building Johnson subdivision and there's 20 houses, how does this get applied to that?
So there's what's called a trip generation manual, and it tells you that, hey, for every house, you have 10 trips a day. And so you would take this $347, multiply it by the 10 and say, single family house, you have to pay $3,400 as your traffic impact fee. And there's, for each type of use, there's that similar setup. So if you're a business, industrial, whatever you might be, we figure out what your trips are and then multiply by the 347, and that's the fee you pay to construct.
Okay. I just never quite understood how that got applied. And that's across the board. So if we built something, the city built something.
There's a few uses in the code that are exempt from paying traffic impact fee. I honestly don't know if we're one of them, but there are a few. But yeah, we have, like, the police station's a good example. We paid traffic impact fee on that.
Okay, and that's just a given. So if I gave you plans for 20 houses, then I'm gonna give you $68,000 somewhere towards the end of this deal for traffic.
Yeah, so
impact.
the collection is at building permit issuance. So whatever our fee is at the time we issue your building permit, that's what you pay.
And yes, ma'am.
So I'm gonna follow up with Philip being confused. Cause I am confused about some things, a lot of things. Anyways. I'm trying to understand. So we put together the list. And are those the only ones that we collect the funds on?
Yeah, so on the list, the ones where I selected traffic impact fee eligible, those are the only ones we collect on.
Okay, so any other thing? Any other development, we don't collect those fees?
No, so the developer has to pay for all of that as part of development. They're considered more local streets and don't provide really a benefit to the city. They provide a benefit to that particular development.
Okay, and then we came up with a list off of studies that we've done and,
From the so when the transportation plan was put together, we put together the list from that, and then I just took that list and transferred it over to the impact fee calculation.
I think I'm understanding.
Okie dokie.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we, so, but we currently collect tip, right?
Mhm.
So if we're currently collecting it, are we using a different formulation then? Is that,
It's,
or
this-
are you just explaining to us how it's done?
yeah, I'm just explaining how it's the,
Okay,
literally everything's the same. It's just a different project list. So when under the old plan, it had a list of projects. Under the new plan, there's a similar list of projects, but some are added and some are subtracted, because we built some and then we added some because we expanded some of the boundaries.
okay. And then, if we were to look at whatever, what is the number today, the magic number, so for next year, you're saying it's 347-ish. What is it
I
currently?
think today it's like 335. Megan's gonna help me with this.
And my guess, what I'm getting at with that is this number 56.8% lower or higher than this year's?
No, so this year's is 338, so this would only be about $9 more per trip. The percentage is just the amount that we can collect. Best way to explain this, but so when we can only collect for growth. So because 43% of the traffic in town is existing, when we do a traffic impact fee, we can only collect for that new portion. So the 57%. So that's what that's telling you is we can't charge 100% to the developer because growth isn't creating 100%. They're only creating the 57%.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I got that too. Anyone else? Okey dokey, moving on. The budget amendment 2022-08, Miss Erd.
And I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Lowry.
Good evening, council. Tonight you have the opportunity to consider ordinance 22-08 to amend the 22 budget. The items that are within it is the decant facility increase of $150,000 that was previously approved by council back on June 6th. So this is just the admin.
Can you screen that? So we can read along with you.
So the $150,000 for the decant facility, and then there is a lodging tax request. They approved an additional $6,750 for the Best Western advertising campaign as part of a 23 request, and a portion of it is at the end of the TV campaign. And then due to an increase in residential home permits, there's a need to increase the school impact fee revenue up to 2 million, so increased by 500,000, just to make sure, again, this is funds that we collect and then remit to the school district, just making sure we don't go over budget. And then for engineering development review, these are fees that we pass through to the developer. We have had more activity than anticipated, so we need to increase those review fees by 55,000. Again, that's just pass-through fee that we pass to the developers and collect. And then the last item is 3 projectors at the Lewis River Room at the community center. We need to replace those as they have failed, and that is $10,000. So with that, I'll open it up to the council for questions.
Is it possible to ask the hotel to send us whatever they're doing so we know what we spent $67.50 on?
I actually have a presentation.
Yes, please, so that we can see what they're asking to do. Did you say it's print or video?
It is video, so it's gonna be advertised on TV, so the area that
Can you
and digital as well.
can you forward that to us so that we can see what they're asking for? Yes, sir.
Move to adopt ordinance 2208 as presented.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions before we take a vote? Hearing none. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Ordinance.
Oh, that's right. I always forget that. Read away, Miss Cody, read away. Thank you. Okay, now we'll go back. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none. Okay, we're back, Miss Erdman, and I assume we're back to Miss Lowry as well.
Yes, we are.
Okey doke.
So tonight, we're gonna be talking about Q3. Almost done with 2022. Which is amazing. So financial highlights for Q3 for the city is that sales tax is up 236,000 to date from the prior year, which is an 8.5% increase. Development activity for building permits, we've had 223 single-family residential homes, 2 commercial, compared to 268 in 2021 for single-family, 6 multifamily, and then 4 commercial. So we're down a little bit on the building side. So building permit revenue is down about 178,000, which is an 18.2% decrease. However, building plan checks are also down 54,000, a 9.9% decrease for 21. But we are up on the planning reviews, so the actual development reviews, subdivision reviews, by 235,000, so 42% from 21, which ultimately that means building permits are incoming, depending upon what happens with the economy, obviously, but there are still developments in place planning to come through. Real estate excise tax is up 649,000, 46.4% increase over 21. And then our police emphasis patrol, we have had $33,684 thus far in overtime since April, which we still have $56,000 remaining. Those patrols have resulted in 609 traffic stops with 333 infractions, 517 warnings, and then 18 arrests. And that's a total of 396 and 3/4 hours of overtime to date.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
And Mr. Purdue, maybe this is for you. 609 traffic stops. We had 333 infractions and 517 warnings. That doesn't add up to 609 traffic stops. Is that multiple things? Like say, we gave you a warning for a tail light out, but we wrote you up for speeding. That
That
be
certainly could be the case, is that it's, yeah, exactly. It could be a traffic stop that results in multiple infractions or multiple warnings or a combination of those two.
Some of these emphasis too were on the parking side of
Yeah.
things, so you wouldn't have had a traffic stop, so the parking citations were a part of this as well.
Thank you.
The other question on that is, we authorized this in January, I believe. This is through the end of September and we're 34 grand in. Is there going to be a spending spree in the next 2.5 months of $57,000, $56,000, or is it not going to all be spent?
I do know that Chief has some other emphasis planned. I don't know if you can speak to some of those.
We do have some additional emphasis planned, but I don't think that will be, my guess is that we will not exceed or reach the 56. I think that with the officer overtime in addition to their regular work schedule, we're probably gonna see a maintained pace through the rest of the year.
So on that $92,000, when it came to us, was that a 1-year deal? Had to be burnt, or is it just roll on?
It was just a set of money that they sent to us, I think, as a patch for all of the headache they caused with the legislation as far as the new requirements. And so there is no requirements, there is no grant agreement. It's ours to carry forward to 2023 and beyond.
If we decide to carry on with the parking person, can this money pay for this year's cost of the parking person?
Yes.
So it wouldn't require any kind of anything on us. The money's already there.
Correct.
Okey doke. Thank you. And yes, ma'am.
Me again, sorry. So was the reason we started late in April because there wasn't staffing available since we were coming off COVID and everything? They just didn't have the extra staff to do overtime
That was when we got,
when we got the money? And then,
it was authorized. It was actually when we got the money. I take that back. February or March. It came back through as a budget amendment, essentially asking, because we got it at the tail end of 2021, but it wasn't in the 22 budget. And so we brought it forward to council to decide what we wanted to do with it.
okay, and then the chief had to implement a plan for the money, and so that's why it was April.
I believe the budget amendment came forward in March.
I think it was 7 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, March.
All right. Thank you.
Okey-doke.
So pavement preservation for 2022 is mostly complete. However, they invoice us after the work is done. So that invoice came out in October. So you're not going to see it as part of this quarterly update. But there's just a few items left to complete on the pavement preservation, including some
The two big things are, we've got the radar for the intersection at Fifth Avenue, and then the pedestrian push buttons, the ADA pedestrian push buttons at that intersection, and then the flashing crosswalk by Burgerville.
And then construction on the SR 503 shared pathway is ongoing. They are hopeful to be done by the end of the month. There's the potential it may carry over, however, it is moving forward.
That's the question. So we paid a premium on that for the original engineer's estimate was 200,000 or 300,000 below what it came in, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I believe that's close.
And so when is the contract? When am I going to walk on that? When does the contract say I'm going to walk on that?
So their contract end date is October 31st.
Is there a performance agreement in there? Because they're not going to finish.
Yeah, I question it too. There is liquidated damages in the contract. There's a lot that plays into it, but that is contained. We have that in all of our contracts.
Because it was granted when
The actual grant, or when we awarded the project?
we awarded the project,
I want to say
6 months ago,
Yeah.
roughly 6 months ago. And they didn't start 6 months ago.
No, they took some time to get started.
They're very slow starters.
Correct.
And so I'm hoping that the city will hold them to the contract to the nth degree. We overpaid for the project, in my estimation, and again, just using what the city offered, what we thought it should be and what it came in as. And they have been very, what would be the good term? Very slow, in my estimation, of building. How many feet is that?
It's a half mile, I believe.
3,000
So,
feet.
yeah, about
2,600
25,
feet,
26, 20 something. in there.
2,600 feet, 5 feet wide.
No, it's 8 or 10 feet wide, 10 feet, I believe.
It shouldn't take 6 months of perfect weather to build 2,600 feet of 8 feet wide walking path, in my estimation. I'm not that guy, other than the fact that I do have people ask me, gosh, why did you put the continuation lane so far to the right? And I have to explain to them that it is a footpath, not a driving lane. And so if they're not going to finish, I'm hoping the city will hold firm. And, all that stuff about, we couldn't get equipment, couldn't get whatever. I'm hoping the city will hold firm on that. I'm sure we will, because they're not going to finish 2 weeks from today. You can see it. I mean, I would think, unless they're gonna work. And I don't think they are.
Do we have any way to? This is what sucks about taking low bids, right? When people can't perform.
Yeah, I mean, we have the liquidated damages, so that's our one
But
protection.
is there a way to also not allow them to bid on future projects? Because they didn't perform on these projects like they should have, because I hate to see people that there's companies out there that'll throw a bid out to just get it. And, maybe they'll get it done, maybe they won't, and I drive by it every day, and I've seen a lot of times when stuff's just sitting. There's no one even working, it's just sitting. And so did they bid that thinking, well, we can get people to work, or we can get this and that? They couldn't get it. And so they made a mistake there, and we're the ones paying for it. So is there a way to keep them from bidding again?
There is, it's kind of legally difficult. So there's not to get too much in the weeds, but you can have supplemental requirements for your bid. So state law allows that. I've seen some cities where they have like a ranking program for contractors, and if you haven't performed on previous, they can use it. There's a lot of legal that goes into that because this, to be frank, the state is pro contractor. They're not pro jurisdiction.
Yeah.
The laws are all written in favor of the contractors. So you can get there, but it's difficult.
Because I would like to see stuff like that, because the state also has, we have to accept low bid. And so who gets screwed? It's the citizens that are paying for it. They get screwed because we have to accept low bid. And if we don't have a way to rank these people and say, look, you shouldn't be doing this work. You didn't perform. Yeah, we got $10,000 back from you, whatever it is. It's not enough to hurt them over the project. So there has to be another way for us to keep people that shouldn't be bidding on these projects from bidding on these projects, especially if we have to take low bid.
Okay.
So looking at our general fund for revenue, we're at 79.2% of the overall budget. And our governmental revenue is less than last year due to some grants received last year, but not this year. Licenses and permit revenue is down and permits are down. And then the good news, but I don't know if you would call it good news, is our interest revenue is up because our rate went from 0.087% to 2.5% with the state LJIP and then the county pool, which that also has some ramifications, as we all are aware of what those are. So good news is that in the interim, we're receiving more interest revenue on our funds. So looking at our sources of funds, we still get the majority of our revenue for the general fund from our taxes, and then also from our services, which the services include the indirect cost allocation. So the other funds paying the general fund for the general services, support services which the general fund provides. And then looking at our tax revenue, property taxes are at 43% of the overall base, sales tax at 36%, and the utility tax at 21%. Looking at our sales tax revenue, we are at 3 million for the year based upon accrual with the 2-month lag, and then 3.9 million is what we've received to date, January through September.
So do you see us coming in better than 21?
Yes, I foresee us coming in over 5 million by the end of the year. Because we're about to go into our highest quarter. So we still have August through December to collect for 22 of activity. So 5 months still left to go and we're already at close to 4 million. So sales tax continues to be high. Which in looking at our month to month, the far left column is 2018 and the far right column is 2022 for each of the months. And 2022 continues to outperform previous years. And then looking at what that is coming from for what retail industries or what industries it's coming from, the majority is from the retail trade. And then another good chunk of that is construction. So if construction starts to dwindle within the city, then obviously that piece of the pie will shrink and our overall sales tax will decrease. Food services is also another good chunk that we get from, and that has increased with the addition of the restaurants you've seen in town quite a bit. I think this was closer down to 5% when I first started. So this is definitely a piece of the pie that's getting a little bit bigger as those industries come into town.
Are your door dashes included in that number?
That is correct. Delivery services, Grubhub, DoorDash, all of those. And then looking at our overall sales tax for where it goes, we've sent approximately 30 million up to the state, to transit 3.3 million, the county 705,000, and then criminal 470, and mental health 470. Of the criminal justice tax, we do get a portion of that back. So we have received 271,000 to date, which is about 57.6% of those collections to date. Are there any questions about the general fund revenues before I move on? Moving into our general fund and the different departments. Looking at our overall general fund budget to actual, we're at 61.7% of the budget to date. And if you're looking at it, you can see that there are some increases over the third quarter of the previous year, which that's for a variety of reasons, turnover of staff, as well as some additional work that we're doing within the city. So looking at the actual department. So in court, our public defender costs are up about $22,000. Our jail costs are up as well as our judge costs. For the executive and HR department, we had a change of how we classified one of those positions. For the executive assistant, it's now split 50-50 between the two departments, which is why one is less and the other is more. In addition, our insurance was up last year as well by 42,000. And then in engineering, we have the 129,000 in engineering review consultant services. That's the pass through from the developers that go through to pay for those costs. And then with facilities, we did have the addition of the facilities fleet person that is charged to that department, a portion. And then for the police department, we had some turnover. We had 4 positions leave, and then we filled those midway through 2022, which is why that is more as well. Are there any questions about the departments within the general fund?
What falls under legal?
So legal, that is going to be our prosecuting attorney as well as our contract attorney, and then the associated costs for like memberships, like to have our prosecuting attorney have a membership to legal law and a couple other items. So it's mostly the contract for both the civil side and then the prosecuting attorney / paralegal.
So that's the paralegal, the prosecuting attorney, and our city attorney. That is not the contracted public defenders.
Correct, that was under court. So, and that those costs are up. So the public defender costs are up $22,000, but the legal department doesn't pay for the public defenders.
So looking at court, I mean, Do you see them spending $400,000 in the next 2.5? Am I understanding that right?
Correct, and that's where our jail costs come from, and so depending on,
We're waiting on them to bill us.
yes, we were caught up, but we're no longer caught up, so we're hopeful to.
How
get
far
that
are we
one.
behind now?
I would have to look. But the fact that we only have $16,000 in jail costs at this point in the year tells me that they haven't billed us yet.
And most of that's probably Stevens.
Correct.
I assume they bill.
They bill on time regularly, yes.
Yeah, they need the money. So would you make a note to send to Miss Erdman so she can send it out to us? What they're behind on?
And then as part of that court costs as well, we do budget $200,000 for public defenders because we did have that back in, I believe it was 2019 where we hit that mark. But since then, and since COVID happened, we have not hit that mark. And so part of that 900,000 that we have budgeted is likely, you're absolutely correct, not going to get spent because if we don't have to pay for the public defenders, then we won't spend it.
Because I do notice, I watch court, that there is a public defender recoupment fee of $300, I think is what it is. So half the time he waives that off, and then the other half it's there. So that would come under somewhere on the other side of money coming in as well.
And I can send you that specific line item if you would like to see how much we've collected in that recoupment fee.
Yes, please.
Any other questions? Real estate excise taxes continue to be high. We have had 2 record years in a row, and we just continue. We're at 2.4 million to date compared to 1.4 million last year, which is a 46.4% increase. Obviously, as mortgage rates continue to increase, then this may potentially go down, but then home prices are high. So it's kind of very dependent upon what happens with the economy and the market. So we may start to see a dip. I've been expecting it and I have not seen it yet. I just continue to see it being high. So we'll see what the last quarter of 22 brings. For our streets fund, we are still collecting the motor vehicle tax, and that is still not doing as great as it did several years ago. It continues to decline. This does have a 2-month lag on it as well, so the 55.2% compared to budget is expected because we are 2 months, we still have 5 months to collect. And then for expenditures, if you take out the capital or the mill and fill and the slurry seal that we have, that's 1.1 million of that budgeted services line item. We are on track, so that 36.7, we have already spent more than that, we just haven't gotten the invoice yet. We had a $700,000 check run last week, that most of that came from this fund, so. Are there any questions on the street fund? Okay. Moving on to the Parks Fund. So the Parks Fund is doing actually fantastic. We have had a increase in our revenue for the community center. We're at 145,000 compared to even prior to COVID, we hit right around the $100,000 mark in 2019. So we're doing fantastic. And that 100,000 was at the end of the year. So we continue to see people renting as well as our senior center. We've not seen as many rentals as we're getting in there. So again, the rentals are going great, which is good to hear. And then as far as expenditures, we're at 72% of budget to actual, so we're on track with where we are at in the year. Are there any questions about parks? For our storm fund, we are right on target for our revenues. We're at 76.1% of drainage service charges, which is a little bit being above due to the growth that we've had this year. And then for our expenditures, when you take out the capital cost, We're actually at 55.4% of budget to actual. Are there any questions about the storm fund?
One for Mark. Mark, have all the basins been cut so that they're not tall for the winter? That you know of?
Yeah, we try to hit them 3 or 4 times, so we're at least on 3rd or 4th, so yeah, everything's done.
Moving on to the water fund, we just are coming out of the irrigation time and the irrigation bills. And so we are at 81.3% of budget to actual on our water services, which is to be expected. As we recall back in the second quarter, we were lower than our target because we weren't in the high usage season. So we're right on track to hit our targeted revenue number for water. And then for our budget to actual, without the capital improvements, we're at 70.7% of budget to actual. And the good news is our purchased water is less than where it was at last year by $267,000. So that is an improvement as well. So are there any questions about water?
Our wells are doing better or just the demand was off?
I think it's a little bit of both. The wells did well. We had a short period with well 9 where we had some issues, but those got taken care of. And yeah, from a consumption,
Consumption is higher than it was last year, so.
so yeah, wells are doing good.
So looking at our sewer fund, again, the services are on track with what we'd expect with growth. We're at 77%. And then for our expenditures without the capital included, we're actually at 70.6% of budget to actual. Are there any questions about the sewer fund? And then looking at what we're holding on hand is cash and investments. We're holding about $72 million on hand. We have a majority with our county pool. We do have a good chunk with the state investment pool, and then we have some long-term investments as well. And then for all of our funds as well as off to the right. Are there any questions about cash and investment? That is all I have for you.
Any other questions for Ms. Lowry? Yes, sir.
Just kind of an informal observation,
Please.
Mr. Mayor. As I was looking at this and we're getting ready to approve our budget for in the next 60 days or so, I'm sure Mayor Johnson and Councilmember Bowman will appreciate this. Our first budget that we approved back in, I think it was 2012. My memory serves me correctly. It might be off $1 million here or there, but I believe our total budget was about 48 million, but we were on a biennium budget. So the budget we are going to approve this year is more than double. We've more than doubled in 10 years revenue and everything. But I think we've also managed the city's finances well. We've kept our debt extraordinarily low. And I just want to thank staff for all the hard work they're doing and council too for navigating it. I mean, it's been quite a journey, 10 years.
It was. Anyone else? Seeing none. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Urban, it's your turn.
Great, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Earlier today, I emailed out the Clark County Transportation Alliance 2023 policy statement. You have it here if you would like to look at it. Essentially, we had a meeting last week. They've updated this to help with lobbying for 2023. We did change our, I'll try to make this a little bit bigger for you too. Okay. We did change our projects on this list. We used to have 502, 503 intersection because we were lobbying for inflation on that. We've replaced that because we decided, the legislative committee decided not to add that to our agenda this year. And so we replaced that with Eaton Boulevard from Southwest 20th Avenue to SR 503. It's about $3.3 million project to improve the roadway up to urban arterial standards. And then we also had the Grace Avenue realignment project on here, which we have now replaced with the downtown revitalization and circulation study that will be tackling this year. So they're asking for just consensus from council to be able to use our logo and that we sponsor this document so that we can use this as a regional wide tool for lobbying. So, you have any questions?
The only thing I have is, I don't feel like I had enough time to look all of this over, to make an informed decision on whether or not to do that. And I would like to possibly table it until the next meeting so I can have some time. Waiting until a couple hours before the meeting is difficult. I'm running around trying to get food fixed for my kid and all of that. So I would like to have a little more time to look it over and make a decision.
I think they requested we have an answer to them back by the 1st of December, so we have some time.
Okay, thank you.
So I will bring this back at the next meeting then, and we can maybe get a decision then. And then last but not least, a couple of meetings ago, we talked about, met with the YMCA, they presented about waiving some potential fees to assist with their building. We decided to waive basically the plan review and engineering fees at that time, including the traffic impact fees. Then we talked about potentially doing some waivers for the system development charges, but that would take some code updates to bring forward. I've been doing a little bit of research on that. And so I just wanted to get some more information in front of you. For the SDC waivers, I wanted to reiterate that I have some concerns about how to write that in a way that this isn't going to impact several other projects throughout the city. I did do some research through the RCWs to see if there is options for waiving SDCs. The only thing in the RCW that allows for a waiver of SDCs is for affordable housing. We do have our capital surcharge program, which currently is written to be able to waive or use that surcharge program if the project has 10 ERUs. This YMCA project is potentially going to have 7 at this point. That's what their estimate is. So I kind of wanted to bring that forward. I'm not quite sure how to draft language on the water and sewer side for SDCs that would not require us to waive these for other projects in the city. With the way our water and sewer is, obviously, we've got some big capital projects coming down the pipe that we need to do for capacity for the long term. So I don't know if we want to go down that path. So I just wanted to see if council is interested in maybe updating that surcharge language to be able to evaluate this maybe for nonprofits on a case-by-case basis. Do we want to lower that ERU count, which would potentially allow that surcharge program to be utilized for smaller projects as currently is now the 10. So I think we can still get to a point where we can not necessarily waive those fees, but use the capital surcharge program. And if, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, it basically allows them not to pay that SDC up front, and it increases their sewer bill on a monthly basis. They pay that increased sewer bill until they come back and pay that SDC. So it could go on in perpetuity, which could mean essentially more money in the long term for the city if they don't come back and pay that system development charge. So I wanted to throw that out there just because I think we may run into some issues with trying to draft some language for waiving those SDCs for a nonprofit. So
I would like to find out where the county's at with the discussion about using ARPA funds before we spend a whole bunch of time on changing our code language, if that can't even happen from the county side. That's where I'm at with it. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so Aaron, based on that presentation, I believe Mr. Westby said had some examples of cities. And I did some cursory research, so I'm just looking for confirmation that when those cities gave the Y money or land, they then got something in return. And that's what I'm hearing is the issue with the SDCs and waiving them. So, and I don't personally, this obviously just me speaking, I don't want the city to own a pool. So I'm not interested in a quid pro quo on that. So I'm not, the SDCs seem like too far a reach for me at this point. But the capital, whatever,
Surcharge.
thank you. I don't see what the risk would be for that. And maybe you could. Maybe we could hear more about that as far as what the pros and cons are for that. But as far as waiving them, I'm not really in that camp right now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'm the same. I don't think we've given them the opportunity. We've allowed them to have some funding. Through forgiveness of our fees. And now they, let them step up and figure out the rest. We don't know where the county is. We don't know where the state is. I know where the state is. State's last in. So the state has said that multiple times, they're last in. So this project, we've done what we said we would do. As far as the SDCs and stuff, I'm not interested in that at all, especially if it means that anybody could apply for those same things. And if we're making rules to only affect one or two businesses or one or two people that would apply for it, I don't think that's the intent that we should have. So I'm fine just leaving it the way it is.
Anyone else? I too agree. Let's pull back on the horses. Let's just hang out for a while, see what happens. And let's not spend a whole lot of time until we figure out if they're going to be a viable deal or not.
So would you like me to hold off then on language for the surcharge program too?
I
Or
think
do we wanna look at-
that's the 4 on this side, the 5 on this side. So I'm thinking, let's just hold off and see what happens. Anything
That
else?
concludes administrative reports.
And then we're moving on to council communications. Yes, sir.
I just have one, in looking through my budget briefly, just tonight, can we get from the city in each category that we have, so let's just look at legislative or legal or engineering. I got salary and wages. Can we find out how many employees that is? Is that 3 employees? Is that 2 employees? I don't care who the employee is, but you may have, and even for PD, it would be nice to know where we're at with what we've authorized. So if, we know we got, the chief, 2 lieutenants, how many sergeants, how many patrol officers, how many open vacancies, what the overhire, has it been filled? Is it just in the process of it? So it gives us a little bit more idea of exactly what that is. Because when I see this, I just, I mean, you see some of these and they're quite high.
Mhm.
And you don't know, is that 1 employee? Is that 2 employees? How many employees is that? What all is included in that?
Be partial to like. for
Half
example,
employees.
Yeah.
So we'll do the breakdown per or per department and what that FTE.
Yeah,
count
but if it's like half, this employee's half
Yeah.
and half with storm, half with water, whatever. I just so I can kind of see what we have there. Thank you.
And then finally, this Wednesday, Ms. Urban, what time is it? The Jolma Park,
It is 5 o'clock tomorrow or Wednesday, this
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
5 o'clock Wednesday at the golf course. The new name is Jolma Park. The county is kicking off their ownership of it, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah, they're ribbon cutting.
Their ribbon cut. So Ms. Cody, if you'll just on the off chance 4 of us do show up, if you'll go ahead and mark that for us. Wednesday, 5 o'clock at I assume it's at the clubhouse.
They're gonna be right outside of the clubhouse around that vicinity somewhere.
Yeah, so if you have the time, I'll see you there. I'll be there. Ms. Urban will be there. She's gonna take care of that for us. And let's see if there was anything else coming up. I'll send you the little, they sent a nice little invite. I'll forward that to everyone tomorrow morning. Beyond that, I can't think of anything else. Can you, Ms. Urban?
Not off the top of my head.
Okey dokey. Pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 parentheses G, city council will enter an executive session to review the performance of a public employee. Time is 8:20. We will gather at 8:25 and we'll take 20 minutes to begin with. So I'll see you at 8:20 with no action. We're back in session. Again, nothing followed. See you